Beloved, will you pray with me? Lord of life, Jesus, we want to see you. We want to see you like Mary. Show yourself to us. Show yourself to us in one way or another today in hearing beautiful music, in praying broken-hearted prayers, in hearing the old story that's a new story every time. God, bless my preaching and bless our hearing, that we can see you in whatever way you reveal yourself to us today. Amen. I know a lot of people named Jesus. There's obviously the person who brings us together today, the radical, brown, refugee, outsider, preacher, prophet, child of God, who could not stay dead, no matter what they did to him. But I know others. There is Jesus, our cheerful and capable janitor here at Bethel. And I just met another Jesus, an undocumented man, at the sheriff's office on Thursday when Reverend Rachel and I went to advocate for the rights and dignity of our immigrant neighbors. Jesus is everywhere, if you just have eyes to see. When I graduated from seminary, my husband Peter and I moved to Mexico for a year to work at an orphanage called the Casa San Jose. And as problematic as we now know orphanages to be for the children in them, the Casa was actually a pretty happy place, all in all. These days I'm Facebook friends with many of the kids we took care of back then. They're young adults now. Many of them have families of their own. Some of them live in LA with documents, without documents. They're making a life. And they unfailingly talk about the joy of that time in their childhood, how much fun they had in the orphanage, how they took care of one another, how in spite of the trauma and the burdens they bore, they felt safe and loved. When we lived there, there were 141 kids on site, and 3 of them were named Jesus. Clearly, we had a problem. How to differentiate between all the Jesuses? The eldest, a handsome teenager, got to be simply Jesus. The next youngest became Chuy, an affectionate nickname for Jesus in Mexico. And the youngest of all was 4-year-old Chuyito, little tiny Jesus. Chuyito was a dead ringer, I imagine, for the original model. Childhood edition, curly brown hair, winsome brown eyes. He barely ever said a word, and he always hung his head to the side. In skepticism or curiosity, maybe anticipating the day he'd be debating the Pharisees. Chuyito loved to crawl into my lap and stay there for hours. And I loved him there because we were both pretty homesick, pretty lonely, and when life is hard, you need a soft place. My favorite memory of Chuyito is not from the year I was living there, but a while later, because you see, when Peter and I left to the Casa to go home to the U.S., we discovered we were homesick for Mexico. And so we'd travel back with a group from whatever church we were currently inhabiting, and we'd give those folks a chance to fall in love with our kids the way we had. And on our first trip back, our group brought a backpack for each of the 100+ kids, stuffed to the brim with new clothes, art supplies, toys, and we handed them out at a fiesta on our last night together. The boys, including Chuyito, put their backpacks on immediately and refused to take them off. They were so proud. And then we strung Christmas lights, and we rented a DJ and speakers, and we had a giant dance party on the patio. Bankers from the North Shore of Boston and little boys do-si-doed and swung one another wildly to salsa music and Madonna. Chuyito, who was now a full-on boisterous 7-year-old, danced like a maniac for hours with his backpack on until his movements finally slowed and he fell asleep, face down on the tile because of the backpack. Even Jesus needs to rest. I have a friend, a UCC minister. She suffers from pretty debilitating depression. You never know it. She seems happy enough and is one of the funniest people I know, but her depression has almost ended her marriage. It has hobbled her parenting. It has caused her more than once to reconsider her career as a person who has to be hopeful as a profession. My friend once told me something I'll never forget. There are times when medication doesn't do its job, when prayers fail, when nothing is working to shift the great gray beast of depression that sits on her soul. And this is what she does in those moments. She changes one thing. Just one thing. She said, if I'm lying down, I get up. If I'm standing up, I sit down. If I'm inside, I go outside. I make myself go outside. And if I'm outside and I just can't stand it, I go inside. If I'm alone, I get with people. And if I'm with people, I go be by myself. She said, if I can change one thing, I can change more things. And if I can change more things, then perhaps I can change anything, or God working in me can. And all she has to do is start with one little movement. I myself have never suffered from a lasting or a truly devastating depression. To be perfectly annoying about it, being happy has always come pretty easily to me. But this year has tested me severely. Some mornings, including this week, the news has flattened me to the bed, immobilized me as surely as a deep depression. Pick your poison. Syrian children, sarin gas, America making mushroom clouds in Afghanistan, North Korea testing ICBMs, flying coach while Asian, ununited. Healthcare under threat, public schools under threat, the rights and lives of immigrants and refugees, black folks, Muslims, queer and trans under threat, under threat. We don't know who will live and who will die before this bitter cup has passed from us. And all this comes against a backdrop of winter rain, much needed rain, but a rain that now feels like it will never end, a perma-rain that chills the soul as well as the body, a new and possibly forever abnormal. I'm trying to remember that this is an Easter sermon. If I often feel despair these days, I who have every advantage, how must it be for those who don't share my privileges, those who face actual and immediate threat to their lives, the undocumented, the brown-skinned, the broke? I have my whiteness to shield me from ICE and the cops, my paycheck to shield me from poverty. I even have a faith to shield me from sorrow if I choose it, to hide in a la-la land of Easter joy where everything turns out all right in the end. And yet, I have met so many people who, no matter how systems and circumstances might conspire to kill them, have mastered the art of defiant joy. I guess that's what you do when people want you dead. Staying alive is your only countermove. And Jesus himself broke and brown and unhoused, is the best example of living big and beautifully in the face of violence and death. I'm always amazed by his capacity for resurrection. Jesus made a decision. He could have stayed dead. He's discharged his duty to the human family. He taught us everything he knew. He offered us an entirely new way of being human. He loved us hard in spite of our frailty. And in return, we rejected, abandoned, and crucified him. Who would sign up to come back in the face of that? I confess that sometimes it just seems like a whole lot less work being dead. If you've had a near-death experience or even surgery under general anesthesia, you know what I'm talking about. There's something a little seductive about that moment where you just slip away into a place beyond pain, beyond suffering, a place of eternal rest that no sarin gas can touch. Jesus lived through the worst that we could do to him. He reached that moment of peaceful surrender, and he made a decision to come back. And he didn't do it by half measures either. He didn't shamble out of the grave, explaining himself. He didn't try to stay under the radar to avoid the authorities. He came back big. We cut him down, but he leapt up high. He made resurrection into a Broadway show tune, complete with the choreography of all those disciples running around the stage. The early church fathers came up with a word to describe the Trinity: perichoresis, literally circle dance. They understood God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit as movement, constant flow from the beginning of creation. And being dead did not exempt Jesus from his place on the dance floor. Did you know that some researchers at Oxford did a study? They taught a group of volunteers, each in private, some dance moves, the same dance moves. And then they took another group individually and taught them all different dance moves. And then they noted everyone's pain tolerance levels by putting extra squeezy blood pressure cuffs on them. I often wonder who comes up with and then funds these studies. And then they took both groups and put them onto a dance floor with headphones on, all together. And the ones who had learned the same dance began to sync their movements. And the ones who knew different moves or heard different music each did their own thing. And when the song was over, they measured each one's pain tolerance a second time, and the ones who had moved in sync were able to stand significantly more pain than before. But the ones who had heard different songs or taught different moves to the same music either experienced no change in pain perception or actually felt more pain than they had before they began. Perichoresis. Dancing in sync had legitimately made the synced dancers able to bear more pain. Of course, they didn't control for people who find any kind of dancing in public painful. Dance is the body's jazz hands for the soul. Dance is God on the move. We dance our babies around the kitchen. We practice moves to Thriller in our bedroom for hours. Dance is the mosh pit, the all-night rave, Asian grandmas at Zumba class, all of them just as much church as where we sit right now. Dance is the Mexican orphan tearing it up on the tile patio, the 3-year-old in the aisles at church who will not be stopped but must dance to every hymn. Dance is ghost ship, the young ones gathering before the fire that night, ready to worship at the altar of joy. And dance is our community. Today on Easter, rising from our own ashes. Dance is resurrection, the mom in chemo doing a 3-minute dance party in defiance of her white blood cell count. Dance is a flash mob practicing for the climate march to show how the earth will rise up against us if we don't rise up for her. Dance is what we do when we have too many feelings and not enough words. Dance don't cost a thing. It belongs to everybody without regard for ability to pay. To dance is to let God move through us, reanimate us no matter what grim reapers are haunting us. The perichoresis that began before everything, the music still playing, healing us, body and soul. And dance is this guy. This guy. To dance is to laugh in the face of death and all its minions. They have not won, whoever they are, if we can still dance. Every day, someone, somewhere faces the powers of death, but then they change one thing. They make one little move. That's all. They put down the bottle. They call the therapist, the DV hotline, the immigration lawyer. They pack a bag. They write their name on the application. If they are lying down, they get up. They join the dance. If a Mexican orphan named Jesus, carrying such heavy burdens, can get up and dance, so can you, so can I. It just means make one little movement, change one little thing, and then another little thing, and soon we can change anything, because we were made to be in this flow, because, as the old hymn says, made like him, make like him we rise.